This is an amazing rediscovery of endangered DNA.
Using that DNA and those lost genetics, we can help recover the American red wolf population.
No.
Hello everyone, I'm back. I'm sure we're all aware of the Colossal debacle and their so-called direwolves. And yes, it's all very convoluted and the scientific community is currently in an uproar, but that's not what I want to talk about today. I would like to discuss the other animals that Colossal has cloned, and that they claim will help conserve this rare species in the wild and promote conservation. And it is not an extinct animal, it is a contemporary species, the critically endangered red wolf, Canis rufus. Red wolves are the only wolf endemic to North America, and they are very rare. They are the rarest canine in the world, with only 16 individuals living in the wilds of North Carolina. Colossal claims to have cloned 4 red wolves, and that these red wolves will aid in the genetics of the wild and captive population, prevent genetic bottleneck, and overall promote better conservation practices for this rare species. However, this is a bunch of phooey. The animals they've cloned will never be incorporated in the wild or captive populations, purely because the fact that the animals they have cloned are not even red wolves. So, if these animals are not red wolves, then what are they? Well, it's pretty simple. They're coyotes. Specifically, these animals are Gulf Coast canids. They are a population of coyotes found on the Gulf Coast of Texas. The reason they are referred to as Gulf Coast canids is because in their genetic admixture, there is varied percentages of red wolf made up in their DNA. A study published in 2022 found that 38 to 62% of the resident coyotes in the Gulf Coast Canid project had some red wolf admixture, likely acquired within the past 30 years. 2 unique individuals having 50% red wolf admixture or more. Now, that is quite impressive, but to understand why Colossal's clones are not red wolves, we must first understand where red wolves came from, as well what makes them unique from other animals, and what makes them unique from these clones. Red wolf ancestry dates back to the mid to late Pleistocene, with their primary range being found within the southeastern United States, with the oldest known modern red wolf fossils being around 10,000 years old. This means that red wolves would have coexisted with iconic megafauna, such as mammoths, ground sloths, smilodons, and direwolves. Alongside that, they would have coexisted with various members of the Canis genus, gray wolves, eastern wolves, and coyotes, which goes into a point that Colossal tries to make in defense of their clones, is that they would share genetic admixture with all of these species. Which is true. Now, don't get it twisted. Red wolves are still a unique species that does differ from gray wolves and from coyotes, but at the same time, they do share genetic admixture with gray wolves and coyotes, with gray wolves sharing about 40% of their DNA and coyotes sharing about 60%. And this is something that we can totally expect from members of the Canis genus, as historically there are many hybridization events amongst the Canis genus during the end of the Pleistocene, where you had eastern wolves, Great Lakes wolves, gray wolves, coyotes, and red wolves all hybridizing at various different points during the end of the Pleistocene, and this eventually produced our modern established populations of these members of the genus. Now, to understand where red wolves and subsequently eastern wolves fall into this, we must first understand the divergent point between wolf ancestry and coyote ancestry. The best candidate used to describe the early origins of wolf ancestry and coyote ancestry would be a canine known as Canis lopophagus, which ranged from the Pliocene to the early Pleistocene. From there, the divergent ancestry between wolf ancestry and coyote ancestry begins to take shape, with coyote ancestry descending into North America sooner than that of gray wolves, allowing them to coexist with the iconic megafauna like smilodons, mammoths, and mastodons mentioned earlier. Over a few thousand years of isolation, and eventually gray wolves would migrate into North America. And not just one gray wolf, likely several different waves of gray wolf have descended into North America since the end of the Pleistocene, and hybridized with the established coyote ancestry, eventually producing modern coyotes, eastern wolves, red wolves, and all of the modern gray wolf subspecies we have in North America. So the point Colossal tries to use as a defense for their clones in that red wolves share genetic ancestry with gray wolves, coyotes, and eastern wolves isn't necessarily wrong. However, we must ask ourselves, based on the close genetic ancestry of eastern wolves, red wolves, and coyotes, at what point admixture events produce it either being a red wolf or produce it being a coyote. And to come to a better understanding of that, we must look at the animal's phenotypic traits and their ecological divergences. The phenotypic traits of an animal are primarily describing their morphology, the physical form and the structure of the animal, and this will have a very big effect on its ecological niche and how it competes amongst other species in the environment. With red wolves, we see that their phenotypic traits differ from, say, coyotes for a couple different reasons. One is their general size. Red wolves, true red wolves, will exceed averagely larger size ranges than that of coyotes, with large individuals, such as males, reaching 70 to potentially 80 pounds, whereas large male coyotes typically only tip the scales at around 30 to 40 pounds. That difference in size might sound arbitrary, but understand that the difference in their size will influence their prey preference as well as their mating habits. Red wolves are what we refer to as a macropredator. Macropredators influence most things in their ecosystems, from animals the size of white-tailed deer and feral pigs to animals the size of cottontail rabbits, gray squirrels, and rodents. They will also influence mesopredators, with animals like raccoons, opossums, foxes, and coyotes being mesopredators that are normally influenced and suppressed by macropredators like red wolves. Whilst often confused for each other, red wolves are far more dominant on the landscape than coyotes, with this footage from Alligator National Wildlife Refuge showing an adult female red wolf displacing and chasing an adult male coyote. Because of these differences in their ecology and morphology, we see different behavioral outputs, with red wolves forming multi-generational family units not too dissimilar from gray wolves, whereas coyotes tend to be a lot more fluid in their social dynamics. So from this very brief discussion on phenotypic traits and ecological divergences between red wolves and coyotes, we now must look at the cloned animal that Colossal referenced, which the individual animal that Colossal cloned from the Gulf Coast Canid project is known as LA52F. Despite her red wolf-like appearance, we will reference Dr. Joseph Hinton, who was the former field supervisor of the Gulf Coast Canid project, who caught this animal in 2022.
This is a female. She's got big ears. She kind of looks wolfish. Again, she's like 32, 34 pounds, very long-legged, very tall, very thin, and I guess lanky. They can look a lot like wolves, which is why people confuse them and think they're wolves at times. But once you have them in hand, clearly not.
Colossal contends on their website that LA52F has very high red wolf ancestry, 70.8%. And if that's true, that is very impressive. But we must also remember that red wolves, eastern wolves, and coyotes, because of their common ancestry, are very closely related. Because of this close genetic relation, we must look at LA52F's phenotypic traits to see if she matches that of her red wolf. Using morphological measurements of LA52F collected by Dr. Joseph Hinton and morphological measurement standards of red wolves collected by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we could compare and contrast her phenotype to that of a red wolf, which we can put on screen here. As we can see, LA52F morphologically would not fall in line with even the minimal morphological standards of a red wolf. Because of this, phenotypically, LA52F would not be considered a red wolf by any means. She would simply be considered a coyote by any legitimate science. Despite this glaring problem in their claims, Colossal and various content creators they fund to promote their work refer to her and the clones made in her image as ghost wolves.
Ghost wolf.
Ghost wolf.
Ghost wolf. Ghost wolf.
However, the term ghost wolf is not supported by any legitimate research, as Dr. Joseph Hinton can elaborate.
Now, geneticists, when they're publishing papers and stuff like that, they come up with like, cute terminology to sort of help promote and sell their papers to get people to cite it and whatnot. And so they refer to this as like ghost alleles or ghost genetics or something like that. But what you're talking about is just lost genetic variation due to the bottleneck. And so when you hear terms like ghost wolves, that's where they're getting at. I don't support that terminology. And I know the Fish and Wildlife Service and the state agencies that I know, like TPWD and Louisiana Division of Fish and Wildlife, don't support that. They prefer you to refer to the animals as Gulf Coast canids or coyotes.
Colossal's rampant use of the ghost wolf term is not one that aids the conservation practices for true red wolves, as many people in the red wolf recovery zone in North Carolina believe that red wolves are all coyote hybrids anyway. So for a multi-million-dollar company to be pushing the narrative that these coyotes that have red wolf ancestry are red wolves pushes that myth and stereotype further. Their entire website promotes this terminology with very little regard.
Oh my goodness!
Truly, we can put our faith in Colossal, as they utilize the popularity of an actual parachute scientist to promote their claims.
But this is a proof of concept to show what this technology is capable of, and the real game changer is that this same technology has been used to clone critically endangered red wolves, which is an animal, I think we've talked about it before. It's the most critically endangered wolf species in the world, and
funny enough, Galante doesn't even know what a red wolf is. In his Ozark Howler special, which is meant to focus on red wolves, he takes a man who supposedly had an encounter with a wild red wolf to a wolf conservation center.
That's it.
Sounds the same.
That's that sound.
That is.
This is it. Right here. This is it.
However, what they fail to understand is that Galante isn't actually showing them red wolves. He's showing them Mexican gray wolves. Speaking of Mexican gray wolves, Colossal themselves don't know what actual red wolves are, as there are no true red wolf images on their website. Thankfully, they removed most of their AI imagery depicting red wolves, and the image of a Mexican wolf as they're trying to pass off as a red wolf. But in the one instance of a true red wolf on their website, they claim it's a Mexican gray wolf. This is a prime example of Colossal not understanding anything about red wolves or their conservation as a species. Their CEO, Ben Lamb, has been one of the most infamous offenders in this regard, appearing on the Joe Rogan podcast making unsubstantiated claims without any credibility to those claims.
They look like coyotes.
Well, because the ones in North Carolina even look more like coyotes.
Really?
And yeah,
People confuse them and think they're wolves at times, but once you have them in hand, clearly not. I mean, this is a 38-pound male. This is a 78-pound male from North Carolina.
Making these wild claims that directly threatens the stability of red wolf conservation is baffling. What's even more baffling is the researchers who initially collected this data, like Bridget von Hollet, that are aware of how dangerous these claims are, has made no attempt to save face, especially as Ben Lamb causes a riot.
Top of her field. She's one of the top wolf geneticists in the world, Bridget von Holt, identified a population of wolves. And what she found is they actually have more quote unquote red wolf in them than the red wolves that are being identified in North Carolina.
You lied? Who told you to lie? You did! You're not a liar! That's my area!
Overall, this entire Colossal situation with the red wolves is extremely tiring, and it is very dangerous for red wolf conservation. Thankfully, I've not seen many content creators speak about the red wolf situation, and that's because I do not have faith that majority of people that make content around Colossal will understand the nuance of red wolf conservation and taxonomy. I have seen a few videos, most of which are extremely disappointing, including, unfortunately, Hank Green's video. Whilst I love Hank Green doesn't seem to understand the nuances of red wolf conservation, taxonomy, or evolutionary history. As well, he says some things that are just blatantly wrong, as we do have fossilized evidence of red wolves, which he believes we don't, in his video. Do I, however, believe that there might be some potential use for the Galveston population to aid red wolves? I do, in fact. I do believe with proper education and proper research into the Galveston population, we can learn a lot more about how red wolf genetics persist, we can learn a lot more about hybridization, and there could even be a timeline in which we do selectively breed Galveston canids for red wolf-like traits. That is entirely dependent on certain things. We don't exactly know how that would go, but it is something that I do believe could happen. However, what this company has done in their attempt to gain investors is appalling, as they have actively threatened the program to preserve the most endangered canine on the planet by spreading rampant misinformation on their clones, conservation, species classification, and even perpetual myths about red wolves that plague the species to this day. Colossal has not cloned red wolves or ghost wolves, they have cloned a coyote, and their attempt at claiming anything otherwise is clear disregard for the well-being of red wolves as a species. Additionally, red wolves don't really get any benefits by cloning. The issue with red wolves is not a lack of genetic diversity, at least not as a rampant of an issue that Colossal claims it is. Contrary to Colossal's constant insistence, the red wolf population, aided by the captive breeding programs like the SSP and SAFE, have produced a healthy breeding population of at least 120 individual animals. That's more wolves than in Yellowstone National Park. Increasing anti-wolf sentiments caused a significant decline after 2012, with illegal gunshot mortality and vehicle strikes taking heavy casualties. Additionally, red wolves are very territorial, unlike coyotes, and just like gray wolves, will kill other red wolves trespassing. That and their other normalized causes of mortality, amplified by humans, the population in 2020 reached a mere 7 individuals. Steadily, the population has increased since then. But this timeline shows that lack of genetic diversity is not the reason why red wolves declined. It is human-caused interference. Something that no one wants to acknowledge with Colossal is that Mexican wolves were lower in their founding population, a mere 7 to red wolves' 14. And yet the Mexican wolf population is doing far better than red wolves, and in the next few years will likely expand into new recovery zones. Why is this? It's not because Mexican wolves have better gene diversity, it's because they have less pressure from people. Colossal is banking on the general public's lack of understanding on both red wolves and their direwolves to promote themselves. All this is a glorified advertisement to investors, whilst simultaneously making a mockery of endangered species conservation. It is up to us to educate ourselves and the general public on issues like this. Within our current day and age, endangered species conservation is more threatened than ever. So to have a multi-million-dollar company perpetuating misinformation in the name of money is truly appalling. It is baffling to all those who are willing to let this slide, who are potentially going to let the rarest canine on Earth fade back into extinction.